I'm warming up my voice. All right, I'm gonna have a sip of water. All right. Good morning. I hope everybody had a wonderful Halloween. Wanted to read, comment some of my notes and some quotes from books and etc. I wanted to say this is purely, entertainment. Yes, this is just a point of view. I'm not trying to convince or change your mind or even sell anything. I'm not a specialist in anything or a doctor or a PhD. Take everything I say with a grain of salt. Yeah, it's possible that I'm mistaken. All right, totally possible. So I wanted to thank everybody that interacts with my videos, with my audios. To me, it's a, I don't know, a good feeling. When I see three views, three likes, and one, maybe two, sometimes three comments. So to me, it's a huge victory. When I look at other channels and they have millions of subscribers, they have millions of views, and when only 1% of comments, you're like, something is off here. You know, so this audio, this video is going to be about civilization. Yes. Um, some people have said civilization is like the thinnest crust atop an active volcano. Yeah. Civilization is an anomaly, not to say a monstrosity. Civilization, quote, is like a murderous machine with no conscience and no ideals. Yeah. Civilization will do anything, the most unhumane, actions to stay afloat. Yes. Um, Civilization has been compared, or in an metaphor, in an analogy to the story of Cain and Abel. Abel being a herdsman. Abel is the metaphor, the archetype of the herdsman, the monad, the nomad. And it goes about, following the herds, etc. And he lives off what the earth gives him, and is perfectly in harmony with natural order. Yes, often these are polytheistic, deistic, animalistic, etc. They venerate the stars because they travel using the stars. It's only the mentally ill that interpret it as veneration. No, they just travel using the stars. No wonder they have intimate knowledge about it. No matter when they do, festivals and parties, and look, the stars are aligned this way. Let's celebrate because it means something to them. Only the mentally ill, suppose or think that, oh, they must be venerating and then sacrificing animals and stuff. No, they're not. They're just feasting. It's quite insane. And I often, when you are reading these texts or listening, they always introduce, sneakily, and human sacrifice. They always do that. Right. So Abel, analogously represents, natural order. And then there's Cain. Cain, the brother who, according to some traditions, was the first, a murderer. He, took out or eliminated Abel. Cain is analogous to the city life when people established roots in a specific place, and to maintain this machine, this anomaly, they have to commit monstrosities to keep it afloat. Sometimes it just collapses altogether, and they have to move and build elsewhere. Yeah, this is very, very common. That's why there's ruins all over the place, because it becomes so toxic that it collapses. Its foundations, don't hold, can't sustain it, so it collapses. So I'm going to read some of my notes. After some decades of hard work, a generation is born in one of these civilizations. A generation is born that doesn't give any value towards what their ancestors sacrificed for. They don't build anything. They're like, oh, look at this, so much wealth, so much power. Why do we have to work? Let's just live off our, parents, sacrifices. So they don't build anything. Destruction is, their essence, their goal, and live off the past accumulation of resources. But they notice, of course, we notice immediately, there's a stagnation on innovation, there's a stagnation in production, in creativity, there's a war on the beautiful, on the arts, there's immediately a war on all of those things. As they watch their resources drain gradually, a sort of police, mechanism, a police state is established, composed, quote unquote, of experts. We see this, in most civilizations. They elect these experts. What these experts are tasked with is to find solutions to this existential crisis. But none of these solutions actually involve a change in lifestyle, a change into a natural order, a change into actually working. No, 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 no. In their myoptic, echo chambers, these quote unquote experts will develop theories, on how to ride unicorns and how to slay dragons. Any sort of opposition ideas will be discarded immediately, because as long as funds are being poured into their research, it means they will be open for business as long as it lasts. Of course, these funds often are, money laundering, corruption, take your pick, it's a way of laundering money, etc. Defense mechanisms, to protect this established order. Defense mechanisms will manifest to protect this arrangement. Yes, until there's money, they will protect it. For example, if they come across someone who has good arguments, to dismantle all of their, fantasy, arguments, fantasy ideas, they might resort to name calling, quote unquote, name calling. Yeah, they dismiss you immediately. Oh, you gotta be some, conspiracy theorist. You gotta be some NAZI. You have to be some RACIST. You must be anti this, anti that. You must be a misogynist. You are toxic. So they immediately, just cut off all discussion. They immediately dismiss you with these terms, in hopes of shutting down discourse. That's the purpose of them. That's the whole purpose, is to shut down discourse. Another one is calling, any type, of argument, any type of, speech, etc. Call it violence. Yes. In these echo chambers, all of this to protect civilization, the status quo, the arrangement. They do these things. In these echo chambers, inclusion is essential. Usually, the word inclusion means welcoming, but in this quote unquote new speech, inclusion means restricted speech. It is very traditional, in these arrangements, that the changing of the meaning of words, is very, strongly strongly used, and the policing of the tone of the discourse. They hate sarcasm. That for them it's violence. Like they usually say, it's sarcasm, irony, etc. It kind of puts things in perspective. It kind of alludes you to the big picture, alludes you to your sense of humor and wisdom and etc. And they just hate it because it's like daggers. This is where the no, forget. I'll use this analogy in another time. Eventually, parallel discourse, amongst all of the craziness, eventually parallel discourse will emerge. And all means will be used to stop it. This arrangement, this established arrangement, will use all means at their disposal to stop it. The law is one of them. Changing laws, changing rules, bringing up more restrictions to stop people from speaking to each other, basically. So, disinvitations from mainstream appearances, when there's a mainstream talk, mainstream television, mainstream, I don't know, where everybody has this, everybody's focused. They will disinvite the unclean, the unwanted. They will disinvite them at the last minute. They just disinvite them. We don't want them. It's not one of us. They just disinvite people, and then when they don't have a grasp over these events, they will start petitions, for instance, to stop them, all for the purpose of stopping conversations. Yeah. If something passes through their control, eventually, always something passes over. Bias response teams, the Renfields, you know, the Renfields will be activated. These useful idiots will react immediately to protect the established order. Anonymously, they have the power to report any disagreeing voices. They will report you, even if you're their neighbor or their friend. They will report you. Cancel can be taken to the extreme. They can switch off the power, electricity. They can switch off power. They can switch off the internet. They can, for instance, if there's a talk in some place, they can turn on the fire alarm to stop everything. They can cut even the microphone wires. They can boycott. They can protest. Yeah. And often they have the backup of the authorities, the established order. They are there to protect them. To justify their superiority, endless studies and articles will be quoted. You're in an argument with them, and they just don't stop quoting. But these are all from the echo chambers, in which ideas will be regurgitated, ideas will be recycled, ideas will be laundered, never letting anything in that might threaten their subjective truth, anything that threatens their moralistic superiority. So they write papers to validate each other's moral superiority. Result is circular reasoning in all of their papers and etc. becomes like a self-realizing prophecy. So why is this happening? Civilization, right? Civilization is like a rigged game. The establishment always wins. The established order always wins. Either from building a nation, building a civilization, or from dismantling a civilization. The establishment always win. While they are busy building, a new utopia elsewhere, we call this globalization. While they're busy, building elsewhere, the previous project is being dismantled. All the accumulated resources will be absorbed by the system i.e., from your hands to their hands. One day, you wake up and have to make a line at 5 a.m. for some bowl of soup and bread. This will continue until memory fades away and the thought of a roof above your head and a job, no matter how unstable and precarious, is no benefits, no, impossible hours, and no, health, no, protection, and nothing. Uh, any type of job will be a blessing. You will forget, all the fights that your ancestors had, for better conditions, you know. You will forget about that when you pass, one, two generations, you're making lines to get some soup. Some say, this project called civilization lasts from 0 to 300 years tops. This process just recycles. Yeah. Sometimes they, recreate the same thing in the same area, or often they move to another area. The oldest uninterrupted culture in existence is possibly India, in which every citizen can still recite their culture, their history, up to 3,000 years into the past. I stress uninterrupted, all right? Because although they had, many people invading, quote unquote, there was the Greeks that, with Alexander, the Greeks eventually took, parts of India, not the whole thing, but the the west side, and then there were probably the Mongols, who were so, you know, there was around there, but the it was impossible for them to destroy the culture which was passed from mouth to mouth. It was an oral culture, It was impossible for them to wipe them out. Actually, they end up being as pagans, most of them. They ended up mixing, not only mixing the DNA, but also mixing culture. So when you look at Plato, Aristotle, it has a lot of the Upanishads. It has a lot of the Bhagavad Gita. All the heroes, that you read in the Bhagavad Gita is eventually real people. It's just the Bhagavad Gita is something that is, it's still being remembered by millions of people, and the people that they are, it's mentioned, they eventually become deified, and assimilated and deified and equalized with uh, deities, sky deities, etc. um, they were actually people that did these events, so you know it's their history. History becomes, a mythology. So myths, are actually the most accurate history that you can find. So the Bhagavad Gita is like, a history book. Um, I think I'm gonna shut up now. Yeah, I'm gonna shut up now. I've been talking for almost 20 minutes. All right. Have a nice day.